All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Really quick hitter today. I just wanted to give my 2 cents on our first little bit of drama in the NBA offseason, this round-the-calendar sport that we love so much that is getting off to a spicy start. So Kyrie Irving is apparently having trouble with the Brooklyn Nets in their contract negotiations, which, by the way, we all saw coming when Kyrie was demonstrating a complete and total lack of self-awareness after the season, saying things like, oh, this is an equal partnership between me and Kevin and Joe, and we're going to build this thing, and I'm excited to come back and make all of this work. And then literally the Nets came back and they were like, actually, we're interested in people that actually want to show up to work and people who are actually in this with us, not just talking about being in this with us. So we were not surprised. I'll read the tweet from Shams Charania this morning. Sources, Kyrie Irving and the Nets are at an impasse in conversations about his future in Brooklyn, clearing way for the 7-time All-Star to consider the open market. The Lakers and Knicks and Clippers, if you click on the article, expected to emerge among potential suitors. So I wanted to come at this from a couple of different angles. First of all, I expect there to be a resolution here. The Brooklyn Nets simply don't have nearly enough talent. I'll get into this a little bit more here in just a couple of minutes. But you could argue, even if you do retain Kyrie, even if Ben Simmons comes back at 100%, and even if you make some quality moves this offseason, you might not have enough. The playoffs are all telling. The playoffs are revealing. There's no hiding. It exposes everything. It will expose your weaknesses as an individual, and it'll expose your weaknesses as an organization. It will also expose your strengths as you get to that stage, but there's no hiding. There is no BSing. There is no fooling anybody in the NBA playoffs. And there was one team that seemed to be on a different level than all of the other teams in this playoff field. Not that they were the worst team, but in terms of their performance relative to the rest of the field, you guys saw the New Orleans Pelicans as an 8 seed fight like hell against the Suns and almost beat them. Obviously, they benefited from some injury luck there as well, but they showed a great deal of fight. You saw even the weaker teams like the Atlanta Hawks claw back and get one against Miami. Brooklyn never even really threatened Boston after that first game when Jason Tatum had the game-winning layup. Even on their home floor, they didn't show any fight. And most importantly, they seemed at a massive physical mismatch. My biggest fear for Brooklyn is not their top-end talent. I know what Kevin Durant can do. I even know what Kyrie can do, and I think he's fine as a number 2. I don't think it's a Kyrie Irving problem. What it is down the roster, they don't have what Boston has and what Golden State had and what Miami has and what all of the good teams around the league have, which is a bunch of guys. You need about a half dozen to functionally round out a rotation, like at the low end 4 guys. But you need guys between 6'5" and 6'9" that can guard multiple positions and can dribble, pass, and shoot to some capacity. They don't have to be great at those things, but they have to be good at those things. And instead, Brooklyn was basically running out there with Andre Drummond, a guy who's big, a guy who has moments offensively, but doesn't really have the high-level basketball IQ necessary to function in that setting, isn't polished enough offensively. And defensively, he's all over the place. Sometimes he's on, sometimes he's not. Sometimes he makes these all-world defensive plays, and other times he won't even jump for a block, and you'll be like, what are you doing, man? Trust me, I know. He played for the Lakers last year. Bruce Brown, really, really solid defensive player. He fits that mold to a T. A little bit limited offensively, but that's one guy. That works. That's one. The problem is they let James Johnson go, and they were running a lot of Kessler Edwards there, and he wasn't ready. They didn't have enough of those guys. There's a lot of Patty Mills, too small. A lot of Seth Curry, too small. A lot of, Goran Dragic, not athletic enough at the position. They have a weakness there that I'm not sure that Ben Simmons can fill. At the very best case scenario, they will be a functional team that's not deep enough. So because of those things, it is imperative for them to retain Kyrie, regardless of how you feel about the contract. So my guess is one of two things will happen. Kyrie will either opt in and essentially play out this year in his contract. If he shows up to work every day and has a good season, he can rejuvenate his value around the league and potentially get his max contract next summer. That's the best case scenario for Kyrie, right? What I would do if I was the Nets, if he doesn't opt in and threatens to be a free agent, I would just sign him to the big deal. If Golden State could flip D'Angelo Russell for a player in Andrew Wiggins that ended up being their second best player in this playoff run, then I feel like I could do the same thing with Kyrie Irving, who's a better basketball player than D'Angelo Russell. So no matter what, they should not let him go. I believe this is all just posturing to help Kyrie in his negotiations. But no matter what, they can't afford to let him go. What's Kevin Durant going to do if you lose Kyrie Irving to some other team and he's going at this next year with Ben Simmons and a bunch of role players? Now you run the risk of pissing him off and getting him to demand a trade. So I do believe this is just a leverage play. I do, but let's pretend for the sake of argument that this does go south and Kyrie puts his foot down. He's been known to do that. That's what he did in Cleveland. When LeBron wanted him traded, he was like, get me out of here. If you don't, I will get knee surgery. And that threat worked, and Cleveland got rid of him. So let's say there's some bad blood. Kyrie takes it personally. He tweeted out a little gif of him laughing. Or not him laughing, but some other person laughing this morning. So obviously he's having some fun at everyone's expense with this as well. But let's just pretend he's leaving. The Clippers, the Knicks are a wild card, and who the heck knows what they're going to do. They would have to create cap space and either conduct a sign and trade for Kyrie or a third team involved to dump a bunch of salary so that they could open up space for Kyrie. But either way, I find them uninteresting because the Knicks just simply aren't good enough. So Kyrie ends up going to the Knicks. Good for Kyrie. He'll have a big stage. He can put up numbers. The Knicks aren't doing anything. The Clippers and Lakers are what interests me. The Clippers, I said in the show that I recorded on Sunday, I talked about how, next year I view Golden State as a runaway favorite at this point. But the biggest threat to them out in the West is the Clippers. They're a better version of Boston. And I went into detail on that. I won't go any further. But if you can somehow upgrade the Reggie Jackson position to a player of Kyrie Irving's caliber, and knowing what Kyrie Irving is capable of defensively when he actually is trying, which we haven't really seen much since 2016, that's a really interesting fit there. And, the biggest thing that you have to worry about with the Lakers and the Clippers is the hard cap. The hard cap essentially is if you make a sign and trade, you no longer have the functionality of using exceptions to go over the cap. Once you get to the hard cap, you're done. That's all there is to it. And your best bet is to sign veteran minimums at the end of the season because you can get the prorated salary, which will fit tightly into the small gaps between you and the hard cap. So it's very complicated. For a team like a Lakers, that can be extremely damaging because you don't have enough players right now. The Clippers have a lot of guys, and they're all under team control. And whatever they work on this offseason is going to be just tiny moves on the margins, right? So if you can bring Kyrie in and it hard caps you, who cares? Because you don't need any more guys. You've got enough pieces. So the Clippers, actually, it makes a little bit more sense than the Lakers. If the Lakers were to pull it off, the trick is you got so much salary tied up elsewhere on the roster that now you run into the predicament that you might only be able to sign, 4 or 5 veteran minimum contracts. You might be going into the season with like 10 guys and a bunch of open roster spots. It can get really tricky with the math because of how much money is tied up in their stars. Also, I think it gets really complicated because the only really way you can get Kyrie is you've got to trade Russ. So now you've got to convince someone to take Russ. Brooklyn's not going to take him. Why would they? So you're in this predicament where, unless you can convince KD to punt another season of his prime to play with Russ to then have a bunch of cap space after, maybe. But I view that as a huge long shot. The far more likely scenario is they'd have to find a third team. And they'd have to send Russ there with draft compensation. And then that team would have to send quality players to Brooklyn. It just gets really difficult to pull off. But obviously I like the fit. Kyrie and LeBron were a perfect fit. Kyrie kind of perfectly encapsulates some of LeBron's specific weaknesses and needs. LeBron is a very good 3-level scorer, but Kyrie is a touch better as a shot creator in specific matchups. LeBron is 10 times the basketball player, so don't take it like that. LeBron absolutely can create his own shot. LeBron absolutely can attack matchups. He's the second best basketball player to ever play the game. But Kyrie, as you saw in Cleveland, his ability to create his own shot off the bounce was very valuable to LeBron, especially in possessions where he wants to rest. And then as we've always known, LeBron, for being the best playmaker in all of basketball, doesn't actually like doing that all the game. He wants to be able to throw the ball to somebody and have them do it for him for long stretches of the game. That's why Dennis Schroeder was acquired. That's why Rajon Rondo was acquired in the 2020 season. And that's why they went after Russell Westbrook. It's something that LeBron has always held as something that is urgently important to him. So Kyrie checks that box, and we already know he's a natural basketball fit. So I like it. The only thing that concerns me is the Lakers have an issue with perimeter size. And they have for the last season. And it deemed lethal for them this year. It doesn't matter how big you are in the front court if you got too many Avery Bradleys on the floor and too many guys that are just getting bullied by the bigger guards around the league. For those of you guys who listened to my top 5 things that I learned this season, when we got to the X's and O's portion, perimeter size continued to be one of the biggest things that I value. So I like it for both teams. It's just unrealistic for the Lakers, difficult for the Clippers, and more than likely this is all a leverage play and he's going to end up staying. And then last note I wanted to hit, the Lakers and Nets are in big trouble. LeBron and KD are in big trouble. The Clippers are going to be back. They're going to be better. The Bucks are going to be back. They're going to be better. Boston might not make any moves, but you've got Tatum and Brown 1 year deeper, more scar tissue, the pain of loss, getting them to approach the game with even more intensity than they have in years past. There's a lot of motivation there for them. You know, the Sixers with Harden and Embiid are going to be back and at a higher level. There's going to be a lot more talent in the league next year as everybody gets healthy and gets back into it. The Nets and Lakers simply do not have enough right now. And even if they hit home run summers, they will not be the most talented teams in the league, which means they instantly fall into that second tier of contenders where it's like, you can win a championship, but things got to break right for you. Dude's got to get hurt. Somebody's got to get upset. A lot of things got to go your way. That doesn't mean they can't win. I wouldn't count them out, and you're stupid if you count out KD or LeBron. But it's a long shot at this point. And they're both in trouble, and I don't think it'll be a surprise at all if you see LeBron and KD start getting a little bit of a wandering eye.